All right. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again this week. This is Insight Policing Livestream Uncut. My name is Dr. Megan Price. I direct the Center for Applied Insight Conflict Resolution and teach Insight Policing, Conflict Resolution for Law Enforcement. Today, we're going to be talking with a longtime law enforcement officer, undercover officer, homicide detective from the DC area named Marcos Rodriguez. We're also joined by our regular cohort, Mike Delaney, Andre Brooks, and James Lawrence. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves real quick?
Yeah, I'm Mike Delaney. I'm a 30-year veteran in law enforcement in the DC area as well. I spent most of my time as an investigator, homicides, robberies, police-involved shootings, and I'm a co-instructor for Insight Policing.
Andre?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm also a 30-plus year veteran of the law enforcement community in the Maryland area. Have extensive work in homicide, was a partner with Mike Delaney and Marcos Rodriguez, who are here today, and I'm also a co-instructor with Insight Policing.
Great. James?
Hello, I'm James Lawrence. Over 30 years of policing, park police. I work with all three of these guys too, and it's been a pleasure.
Great. Thank you all. So, as most of you know, Insight Policing is a strategic communication skill set for officers that helps officers recognize conflict behavior in the moment and use targeted questioning skills to understand what's at the root of the problem, what's generating the conflict. And while Insight Policing teaches this to officers, and it also explains a lot of what really excellent cultivated officers do already. And so that's why we have Marcos on to help us understand from his perspective, his whole career of doing extraordinary work, engaging with the community, building trust while enforcing the law. So Marcos, can you tell us about how you were able to connect with community members in that way?
Sure. First of all, Marcos Rodriguez, I also have over 25 years of police experience. And basically what I did was the basic concepts of community policing, we learned this throughout the years, especially back in the 90s. And when I became a detective, I always asked myself, like, okay, how can I bring the same ideas into detective work? Like, even though I was not a community policing officer assigned to a unit, I was assigned to an investigator unit. And I kept doing the same community programs. Like I kept attending the same community programs I was attending before. The food giveaways, the different, going to the churches, going to the community groups. So people understood that I was not a police officer necessarily assigned to a community policing unit, but I was a detective assigned to their community. Obviously, this was before I started getting involved with, undercover work and eventually working in homicides. But that's how I started meeting people, talking to people, understanding what kind of problems they were going through, and why if I had a case, how can I, help my case by bringing people into cooperating with my investigation. So I always found different opportunities, met different people throughout the community. And it was funny because once eventually I was assigned to a narcotics division, and I was working primarily with gangs. And this is back in the early 2000s. And some of the people that I met throughout my police career, I was also like talking to them about the problems that we had in the community. And they reach out to me with information. Sometimes, I was helping people with things that to some extent, sometimes we say, well, that's not a police related matter, but to some extent it is, like finding somebody a job or, going to the schools and talking to the kids, and or just, you know, helping people with just the, how can I say this, just with the regular issues, the day-to-day issues. And those the same individuals who live in the community were the ones who were helping me with different cases, calling me about different things. We had a big prostitution problem in one of the areas that I was working. And at the time, that was one of my assignments, working prostitution. So they were actually reaching out to me and telling me, you know, giving me information about, you know, what was going on in the community.
That's so interesting. It makes me wonder. So it sounds like, you know, you learned a lot about how to engage with the community based on this the idea of community policing, and you're out in the community, you were at the barbecues, at the food giveaways, you know, it really building relationships outside of law enforcement. And then, I mean, one thing that you said was really interesting to me, and it brings up a lot of what is kind of in the news and in conversation right now around helping people with resources that aren't law enforcement related, like helping somebody find a job or whatever it might be, because there's been so much talk about separating those responsibilities away from police work. And so I wonder, as you say that, if allowing police to not do everything. I mean, I definitely agree that there's a sense of police have to do everything from, you know, finding a cat in a tree to helping a homeless person, or, you know, dealing with mental health issues. It can be too much. But at the same time, there's a benefit to having that versatility on the job, because you're able to engage with people around what they need.
Correct. And the same people that live in these communities, they're the ones who are going to be reaching out to you. I had instances where some of the people that I met through different community events, they were witnesses in homicides, and now bringing them to the justice system, because now it's not just what they witnessed, but also you want to develop them as witnesses. And, you know, Mike and Ray know this, you know, you need witnesses to close your cases, especially homicide cases. And it's very difficult because a lot of people don't want to cooperate. They don't want to be part of the system. So, you know, persuading them to understand how important it was for you to close the case and to bring, you know, closure to the family, and getting them involved, it was key. And to me, you know, like I said, it got to the point that they didn't really know me by my last name. They knew me more by my first name. And, you know, people were calling me or just, you know, I had that communication with them. And even just like walking them through the system, like sometimes, you know, I will tell the state's attorney, you know, let me handle this witness. You know, I'm going to go and talk to the witness. I'm going to go and talk to the family. I'm going to make sure that I walk them through the system so that we don't lose them. It's not like you get them on day one and then you don't see them, you know, until the trial comes up. It's like I walk them through the system, like, okay, this is what we want to do. I mean, I remember one time I had this key witness who I actually asked the state's attorney permission to bring him to the courtroom and just to get him familiar with the courtroom, just to be able, I knew that he was going to be testifying. So I had him just sit in the, you know, in the courtroom so that he will not get nervous and be able to testify the following week.
And Marcos, can you explain to the panel one of the biggest reasons why a lot of the guys or people you came across within the community were quite afraid because they were illegals and they didn't want to be, you know, so you had that situation where you needed their help, but you also needed the reassurance that they would not be deported or anything like that because they were illegal. So
right. So in the Hispanic community, there's already a mistrust with you know, when it comes to dealing with the police department or any agency in the government. I mean, we now seeing it with the pandemic. Some people don't want to go and get vaccinated because they're afraid. So for us, it's even worse because in Latin America, the police is actually part of the government, and it's used as a way to oppress the community. So they don't build that relationship, so that when they come here, they bring the same ideas. So it's very important for us to be able to approach that and understand that what the fears are going to be. Like every community has different fears, and it doesn't matter what culture or what race they are. There's always going to be some fear, or there's going to be something that they're not going to trust the police. So it's understanding what it is and then moving forward from that and try to build little by little.
I
So what
just
did
want to
you
add
do?
to, oh, go ahead, Megan.
Oh, well, I just want to know, Marcos, what were you able to do? What did you do to discover what the threat was, right? What their concern was, and build that rapport with people who just by virtue of their culture or whatever it might be, automatically don't trust you in the first interaction. So what were your strategies?
The first one was listening to them, like trying to put myself in their situation, understanding that, okay, they don't want to call 911 because, it might be the neighbor who's actually the one, shooting the gun or dealing the drugs. So it's understanding where they come from. So first of all, was listening, giving them always different ways to approach the police. Like, if you call 911, don't, just to educate. If you call 911, you don't necessarily have to give your name, things like that. I also, for about 4 years, I had a radio show. I was actually in a radio show every Wednesday for 4 years. And it was just basic information that I was giving out to the community. Like if somebody gets pulled over on a traffic stop, what are some of the things that you need to do? And just the basics. And I think when people hear that and they start understanding that, this person, this officer is not just an officer, but it's a human being. I think that's when you start bringing the understanding that, sometimes they had issues too. Like another example, sometimes parents don't know how to raise their kids in school. So, you take the time to deal with those little things like, oh yeah, let me help you out with that. Oh, you don't have a job? Let me help you finding a job. You had to network. You had to be able to know people in other parts of the government, in other agencies, so you can actually reach out to them. Because if you just give a number and say, oh yeah, just call this number, they're not gonna be able to assimilate. They're not gonna be able to just call the number and get the information. What I was doing sometimes was like reaching out and having a person like, okay, now I connect this person, this member of the community with someone in the government so that they can actually resolve their issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you, I appreciate that, Marcos, because I truly feel that that's what's really missing. That's a big part of what's missing today in policing. Marcos, Andre, and I, and Lawrence as well, when we met Lawrence, we all had that same mindset. And I can say for Marcos, it's not just in the Hispanic community. I've worked homicides with him before in every community. And, and he's been the same way. He was a great detective, and he was a great communicator as well. So,
it's funny. While I was listening to Marcos explain that, and I'm quite sure you picked this up. I'm quite sure all of us picked this up. Marcos hasn't obviously gone through the Insight Police training, but a lot of the things that he explained that he did, the listening, the curious questioning, the understanding, that loop to solve those problems and find out what's the issue in the Common Core to get what he needed. I just thought is even without going through the class, he used some of those tools already to do what was needed to get the information and to gain the trust of these people. And that is key to how policing needs to change today as we move forward.
And it's a big part of wanting to do that, wanting to make a difference and to help people. That is a big key. You may not know what it takes to do certain things to close a case, but when you want to do it, then most of the times people would feel that and they want to be honest with you. So,
and one thing it worked for me is what I learned on the street, I actually took that into the interview room when I was, doing my investigations. Also, if you respect people, they will respect you back. Most people, if you actually listen to them, I remember dealing with some gang members, some MS-13 members. And, the first thing was, I showed them respect. They respect me back. And some of them actually became my informants eventually, because of that respect that I gave them. And the fact that they knew that I was approachable, that these individuals, they have family members in the community. Sometimes I was helping people out that had no idea they were actually related until later when I started, putting things together and they have the same last name or they live in the same address. And that's when I realized, the fact that I was respectful, that I gave them a chance, I was fair, actually helped me in my investigation, because now people were actually willing to give me information or to help me close the case.
So Marcos, that's fascinating. And do you think that that's a different approach than is common or typical?
Not necessarily. Sometimes I don't think we take the time to do it. I think we want to get results. And sometimes it's like one of the first things I learned when I started working in patrol is that you handle one call at a time. Even though you have so many calls, you try to concentrate on the needs of that family or that person when they call 911. And I think right now sometimes we don't take that time. We don't necessarily, even though we're rushing, and we thinking about the next call. I think putting your effort into trying to solve that initial call, that call that you went to, I think that makes a difference. I remember another instant, I had a domestic dispute. And the lady was like, she was really afraid. This is back, about 20 years ago. And I told her, I said, go and get a warrant or go and apply for ex parte order. She had no idea what I was talking about. So I just took her to the courthouse. And I went to the commissioner and I asked the commissioner, I said, this is what the lady needs. And she actually went and got an ex parte order. So at that point, I was able to go back and take the husband out of the house. But sometimes taking that, and unfortunately, it's not just us as police officers. I mean, it's the system. Sometimes we don't have the time to do that. But I think when you make those little changes, at the long run, you're going to see the results.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's great advice.
So Marcos, what is the flip side of that? If when you make so much of a difference in the community and you impact the community, is there like a negative aspect of that? Is there some kind of flip side of that, being as an officer or an investigator?
Yes, definitely. Good people start getting to know you, bad people get to know you. And once you start making a difference in the community and you start not just making a dent in the system, but you are in the problem, with the problem that you're dealing with, but you actually start to make a difference. Bad guys don't like that, especially when it comes to drugs, to gangs. They don't like police officers when they get involved, because at the long run, you're actually making a difference in the community. So, you start developing enemies. There's people that don't like you, or they get the same way that I got to know the community. There were bad people that got to know me as well. And they knew what I was doing. They knew who I was. And sometimes that's not really that pleasant.
So Megan, do we have time to get into that, or should we look at a part 2 with Marcos, or what do you think? Because I know he has some good stories to tell. So
yeah, well, I would love it, Marcos. You have done such a service by being on and sharing with our audience, with us and with our audience, those key pieces to building trust and rapport, and opening up that opportunity for communities to see you as a human being, as somebody who can help rather than hinder, those community needs. So we would love to talk more about this flip side, because obviously you're doing your job enforcing the law, eliminating crime. And that is going to have, people are going to be mad about that, but it's for the ultimate good of the community. We'd love to hear more of your stories at another Insight Policing live stream, if you would join us.
Definitely.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. All right. Well, thank you all for watching. Remember to respect, everybody, and to listen and to take that time. I think those are key takeaways. And be curious, understand, right? So thank you all for watching, for tuning in. Like this video, subscribe to Insight Policing YouTube channel, and share. And we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.